In the quiet, sun-soaked village of Ndlovu, nestled between the green hills of eastern Africa, time seemed to move slower. It was a place where the morning mist clung to the banana leaves, where elders gathered under the ancient baobab to share wisdom passed down for generations, and where the sacred and the mundane lived side by side. Here lived Thando, a revered traditional healer, known to all as Ngoka. His hands bore the marks of 1,000 herbs, his voice carried the chant of his ancestors, and his eyes, deep, earth-brown and wise, held the weight of his lineage. His father had healed the sick with roots and prayers, and his grandfather before that. Thando, still in his early 30s, was respected beyond his years, for he possessed a quiet power, one that came not only from his knowledge of medicine and ritual but from a heart deeply rooted in his people's traditions. Miles away, beyond the rolling hills and bustling towns, in the towering glass buildings of Cape Town, lived Amara, a brilliant, Western-educated woman from a prominent family of lawyers and politicians. She held a double degree in medicine and public health from Harvard, her path groomed since childhood for policy reform and global leadership. Her world was one of policy debates, hospital corridors, espresso machines, and late-night conferences. But even with all her success, Amara felt a deep emptiness, an ache she couldn't name. That ache brought her back to the land of her ancestors. When Amara accepted a 6-month public health assignment in Ndlovu to assist with maternal health education, it was met with skepticism from her parents. Why would you go to a place with no running water when you could be consulting for the World Health Organization? Her father, Justice Masiko, asked sharply. But Amara smiled, her eyes defiant but gentle. Because the women there deserve more than just reports. They deserve presence. So she arrived with her boots and books, not knowing that her life was about to change forever. The first time she saw Thando was at the community health gathering. He stood in flowing traditional robes, his voice like thunder and honey as he addressed the crowd. Though they represented very different kinds of medicine, his, ancient and spiritual, hers, clinical and scientific, Amara was drawn to him in a way that made her heart ache. Thando noticed her, too. She stood apart, radiant in her confidence, but unsure in her stance. Her Western clothes did little to hide the strength in her. She listened, not with arrogance, but with curiosity. That intrigued him. When Amara accepted a 6-month public health assignment in Ndlovu to assist with maternal health education, it was met with skepticism from her parents. Why would you go to a place with no running water when you could be consulting for the World Health Organization? Her father, Justice Masiko, asked sharply. But Amara smiled, her eyes defiant but gentle. Because the women there deserve more than just reports, they deserve presence. So she arrived with her boots and books, not knowing that her life was about to change forever. The first time she saw Thando was at the community health gathering. He stood in flowing traditional robes, his voice like thunder and honey as he addressed the crowd. Though they represented very different kinds of medicine, his, ancient and spiritual, hers, clinical and scientific, Amara was drawn to him in a way that made her heart ache. Thando noticed her, too. She stood apart, radiant in her confidence, but unsure in her stance. Her Western clothes did little to hide the strength in her. She listened, not with arrogance, but with curiosity. That intrigued him. Their first conversation was heated. You cannot simply hand out pills and pamphlets and think you've solved generations of pain, Thando said one day after a joint session with pregnant mothers. There is spirit in healing. And community. Amara crossed her arms, a small fire in her eyes. And you can't chant away a hemorrhage, Ngoka. There is science in healing too. And prevention. They walked away from each other that day angry, but thinking. As the weeks passed, they found themselves talking more, sometimes arguing, often debating, but slowly, the heat softened into warmth. They started working together, combining her knowledge of prenatal care with his understanding of local herbs and traditions. The mothers loved the dual approach. Together, they were stronger. One evening, after a long village walk, the rain surprised them. They ran for shelter under a mahogany tree, laughing like children. Her hair was soaked, and his robe clung to him. There, in the twilight between storm and stillness, Amara looked at him and whispered, "I never thought I'd find peace in a place like this." Thando reached for her hand, rough against her smooth fingers. "And I never thought I'd find fire in someone from your world." They kissed, softly at first, then like they were both afraid and electrified. Love blossomed in secret. They would meet by the river, under the stars, and talk about everything. He taught her about ancestral songs and she shared theories from her textbooks. They laughed, dreamed, and ached for each other. But every love story has a storm. Word began to spread. A healer consorting with a city woman? A woman of high class mingling with a traditionalist? The village elders called Thando in. "You risk everything, Thando. She does not belong here. Her world is not ours." In Cape Town, Amara's parents received news too. Her mother flew in with fury in her eyes. "You are destroying your future. You want to marry a man who talks to bones and burns herbs? How will you ever lead if you abandon the world we've built for you?" They forbade her from seeing him. They threatened to disown her. Amara and Thando met one last time beneath the old fig tree. She cried in his arms. "They'll never accept us." Thando held her close. "Let's run. To somewhere in between. Not your world or mine, but ours." But Amara hesitated. The cost was too high. She left the next day. Amara returned to Cape Town. She threw herself into work, winning awards and fellowships, but her eyes lost their sparkle. Her laugh didn't reach her soul. Thando stayed in Ndlovu. He continued healing, speaking to spirits and mixing roots, but his heart felt like a house abandoned. Seasons passed. A war came and went. Roads were built, children born, and elders buried. They never stopped thinking of each other. 5 years later, Amara came back. This time not as a public health consultant, but to bury her mother. Grief-stricken and weary, she wandered the village again. It had changed. Solar panels now glimmered on roofs, and a new health center stood, named jointly after two unlikely figures, the Amara Thando Healing Center. Her heart leapt. He had kept her name alive. She found him by the river. He looked older, wiser. She looked radiant but worn. They stared at each other for a long time. "I never married," he said. "Neither did I," she replied. And then quietly she whispered, "Can we begin again?" He gestured for her to sit on a stone beside him. For a moment, they sat in silence, the years filling the space between words. Then, slowly, the words began to flow, halting, honest, unvarnished. "I hated you," he said quietly, "for leaving." "I hated myself more," she replied. "But I was scared. I was raised to see your world as beneath mine. I didn't realize until much later that mine was the one lacking." Thando's lips twitched in the ghost of a smile. I built a clinic. You inspired it. We treat with both hands now, herbs in one, antibiotics in the other. She looked at him, eyes misty. You kept my name alive. I never buried it. They sat until the sun began to set behind the hills, casting gold on the river's surface. As the colors deepened, he reached out, and she took his hand. I don't want to waste more years, she said softly. Neither do I. The village of Ndlovu was skeptical at first. Old wounds do not close without resistance, and whispers followed them like shadows. Some villagers still saw Amara as the foreign girl who turned her back on her roots. And in Cape Town, the news of her reunion with Thando reached her father like wildfire. You've lost your mind, he said coldly during a call. That man is not your equal. I'm not looking for an equal. I'm looking for my home, she replied, ending the call. But Amara no longer bowed to society's expectations. She rolled up her sleeves and worked side by side with Thando. They co-founded a program called Unity in Healing, pairing Western-trained doctors with traditional healers. Each team was trained to listen, collaborate, and respect. They introduced mobile clinics powered by solar energy. Midwives trained under both Amara's medical guidance and Thando's spiritual teachings. In time, even skeptical elders began to nod in approval as fewer mothers died in childbirth, and children recovered faster when both traditions met in harmony. Their love, no longer hidden, became a symbol. They married on the equinox, when the light and dark balanced perfectly, a metaphor they both appreciated. The wedding took place under the baobab tree where Thando had once been named Ngoka. Traditional drummers played as Amara walked barefoot toward him, her dress embroidered with symbols from both her lineages. Ancestral chants rang through the air as modern vows were spoken. The city people wept at the beauty of it. The villagers danced into the night. Not everyone accepted the change. Justice Masiko, Amara's father, disowned her publicly. He launched legal challenges against Unity in Healing, claiming it endangered lives and disrespected the country's progress. He held press conferences, painted Thando as a charlatan, and Amara as a misguided daughter lost in backwardness. When their funding was briefly suspended due to political pressure, the program nearly shut down. But Amara stood firm. She gave speeches, wrote op-eds, and stood on stages before global health councils explaining the bridge she and Thando had built. Thando, usually a man of quiet influence, spoke for the first time outside Ndlovu, on national television. Tradition is not the enemy of progress, he said. It is its root. Support poured in. Donations revived the program. Young doctors volunteered from around the world. And slowly, the tide turned. Justice Masiko's words lost their power when faced with the undeniable results: reduced mortality rates, stronger communities, and a movement that was spreading across the continent. He never apologized, but he stopped speaking. Years passed. The clinic expanded. A school of integrated medicine was built on the same hill where Amara first argued with Thando. Their home was filled with laughter, music, and later, 2 children. Ao, their daughter, danced between worlds with ease, chanting with the elders one moment, coding health apps with her mother the next. Neo, their son, quiet like Thando, spent his days studying stars and herbs, writing poetry no one understood but everyone felt. Together, they watched the world change. The gap between the traditional and the modern narrowed, not by force, but by listening, by love. Amara's once lonely ache had faded, replaced by a wholeness she never thought possible. Thando often said, You brought medicine to the people. But more than that, you brought the people to each other. And she would reply, you taught me to listen, not with my ears, but with my soul. Epilogue. Love beyond borders. When they were old and the world had turned many times, Amara and Thando sat beneath the same mahogany tree where they once kissed in the rain. The river still whispered. Ao now ran the Unity in Healing program, with Neo by her side. The world no longer asked if their love was valid. It simply celebrated what it had built. Do you think, Amara asked softly, that we were meant to be? Thando smiled, placing his wrinkled hand over hers. No. I think we chose to be. Every day, against the tide. The wind stirred the leaves. Somewhere in the distance, drums echoed. Love had triumphed, not in the absence of struggle, but through it. Not because they were perfect, but because they believed enough to fight, to listen, to change. And because in a world divided by walls and fears, they had dared to build a bridge.